You stand for a moment in the center of a moonlit path between two darkened cottages, and you simply breathe, in and out. The cold air enters you and the warm air leaves you, and the snow falls, one flake at a time, and the moon shines with its ancient, indifferent brightness on everything around you. And you are aware in this moment of a quality of stillness that is not merely the absence of movement, but something more positive than that, something that has its own texture and its own weight, something that presses very gently against you from all sides like the softest possible substance. Like the air itself has thickened slightly with the intention of rest, with the accumulated quietness of all the evenings that have settled over this village in the same way through all the years of its existence. There is a particular kind of memory that does not belong to any one person, that is stored not in an individual mind, but in the accumulated weight of a place, in its stones and its timber and its worn paths and its shaped landscape, in the way the buildings are oriented and the way the paths connect them, and the way the gardens are arranged behind their low fences. You feel this memory now not as specific images or specific stories, but as an atmosphere, as a quality of the air around these old buildings, a quality that says, things have happened here, ordinary things, a great accumulation of ordinary things, mornings and evenings and meals prepared and fires laid and children born and old people buried and springs welcomed and winters endured. And all of this accumulation has become something, has become the specific character of this specific place. The way that a person becomes their character through the accumulation of all their choices and all their experiences, seen and unseen, remembered and forgot. You begin to walk again slowly, following the moonlit path deeper into the upper part of the village, where the oldest cottages are, where the timber is darkest and the carving on the doorposts is worn to a smoothness that suggests many generations of hands brushing past it, many coats snagging at its edge, many children running their fingers along its carved grooves in the way that children always run their fingers along carved grooves. As though they understand intuitively that something has been put there for fingers to follow. The path here is very narrow, barely wide enough for two people to pass. Without turning sideways and on both sides, the cottage walls rise close and dark, their age apparent in every aspect of their construction, in the gaps between the logs that have been filled and refilled over many years with whatever came to hand, moss and clay, and now a whitish mortar that is newer than everything surrounding it, but will itself become old, and will itself be replaced in time by whatever comes next. The moonlight barely reaches this narrow path between the oldest cottages. It comes down at an angle that catches only the upper edges of the walls and leaves the path itself in a deep shadow that is not darkness so much as a different quality of light, a softer seeing, a reliance on the ambient reflection of the moon from all the snow around you rather than on direct illumination. In this soft seeing, everything is present but nothing is sharp, and you find that your other senses have taken up some of what your sight has released, so that you are more aware than usual of the feel of the snow under your feet and the smell of the cold air and the very faint creaking of old timber somewhere very close. A sound so small and so infrequent that it takes several minutes of walking and listening to identify it as the sound of the cottage walls adjusting to the night's deepening cold. The wood contracting incrementally in response to the dropping temperature, the whole structure of these old buildings quietly rearranging itself in the way that things of great age and great resilience rearrange themselves in response to conditions, not resisting but accommodating, finding within themselves the small adjustments that allow continued endurance. You think, or rather you feel in a way that is close to thinking, of all the winters that have made these adjustments necessary, all the nights that have brought the temperature down to the point where the timber speaks in its small voice, all the mornings when the temperature has risen again and the wood has responded in kind, expanding back toward its summer dimensions, resuming its warm weather relationships with the timber around it, the joints loosening slightly. The whole structure settling into a slightly different configuration for the warmer part of the year. This cycle has been going on for as long as these buildings have stood, this breathing in and breathing out that is not breathing but is something that has the same rhythm, the same quality of alternation, the same underlying continuity beneath the surface variation, and you feel it as you walk through this narrow pass, feel the buildings around you as something alive in this deeper sense, alive in the way that only very old things are alive, with a life that has been built up through many years of response and adaptation and quiet endurance. The path opens. You emerge from between the oldest cottages into a small elevated space, a place where the land rises slightly above the surrounding rooftops, where you can see over the village and across the lower roof lines to where the harbor lies in its moonlit quiet, the ice on its surface catching the moon and returning it in a broad, cold brightness that extends to the horizon, or to where the horizon would be if there were clear demarcation between the ice of the harbor and the dark sky above it, but there is not. The two elements merging somewhere in the middle distance in a pale ambiguity that the eye cannot resolve and does not need to resolve, that the mind can leave as it is, an uncertainty that is not troubling but simply present, simply part of the quality of a winter night at the edge of northern water. From this elevated place you can also see the hillside above the village, the slope where the pine and spruce forest thickens and rises toward whatever lies beyond, the brow of the hill dark against the moonlit sky, the trees along it a row of dark shapes with their snow-weighted boughs, each tree slightly different from its neighbors in height and in the angle of its boughs and in the particular way its snow has settled, so that the row of them is not uniform but individual, not a wall but a community. Each tree its own being within the shared being of the forest, each one a participant in the long, slow conversation that the forest conducts with itself and with the seasons and with the land on which it stands. You stand in this elevated spot for some time, turning slowly, taking in the village below you and the harbor beyond it and the forest above and the moonlit sky over all of it. The stars where the clouds have parted in the soft luminous gray of the cloud cover where it remains. The whole scene so entirely itself, so completely and unreservedly what it is. A winter village at night under a winter moon that you feel within yourself a corresponding completeness. A sense of being equally and entirely what you are, nothing more and nothing less, a person standing in the snow in the moonlight breathing cold air, carrying a body that is warm and a mind that has, for this little while, grown quiet and being in this combination of qualities sufficient, entirely sufficient, requiring nothing to be added and nothing to be taken away. The cold in this elevated place is very clean. There is nothing in the air up here but the cold itself. The cold and the smell of the pine forest above and the faint trace of chimney smoke rising from the village below and very faintly the smell of the ice on the harbor, which is a smell that is difficult to describe because it is the smell of the absence of something, of water that has become something other than water, of movement that has become stillness, of sound that has become silence. You breathe this air and it fills you with a clarity that is not sharpness, that is nothing so aggressive as sharpness, but a clean and simple seeing of things as they are. A brief respite from the layers of interpretation and anticipation that usually lie between you and your direct experience of the world. Memory and present awareness have been blending in you since you entered the village, have been moving through each other like two currents of different temperatures meeting in a river, each affecting the other without either losing its essential nature. And now, in this elevated and open place, you become aware of this blending as something that is happening not just in your own mind and body, but in the place itself, in the village and the winter and the moonlit night. As though the landscape itself holds the past and the present simultaneously, as though the old cottages and the new snow and the ancient moon are all present at once without contradiction, the old and the new and the eternal all occupying the same space at the same time and being perfectly comfortable in each other's company, perfectly at home in the same winter evening, the same falling snow, the same cold air. You breathe in again and you breathe out, and your breath drifts away in the moonlight and becomes invisible, and you breathe in again. And there is a continuity in this that matches the continuity of the village, the continuity of the winter, the continuity of all the winters that have preceded this one and all the winters that will follow it. Each one different in its details and the same in its essentials, each one a new instance of something very old, each snowfall a new addition to an accumulation that has been building since long before any of the timber in these cottages was felled, or any of the stone in these walls was gathered, or any of the paths through this village were first walked into existence. You are part of this continuity in some small way tonight, your footprints one more brief addition to the record that the snow holds and then erases, and then holds again in a new configuration, season after season, winter after winter, year after year. The snow on the rooftops below you, seen from this slight height, forms a continuous white surface that connects all the buildings visually, smoothing over the gaps between them, the alleys and the garden spaces and the narrow passages, turning the whole village into a single form, a white form with chimney stacks rising from it here and there, with dark window rectangles set into it where the lantern light behind the glass has darkened now to nothing or almost nothing. With the gentle rounded shapes of trees and fence posts, and the low stone of the well emerging from its surface as if growing from it. In this moonlight and from this angle, the village looks like something made in a single gesture, a single intention, and yet you know, having walked through it, that it is the work of many hands and many generations, the accumulation of many individual decisions and many individual needs, all shaped ultimately by the same conditions and the same values and the same deep knowledge of what it means to live in this place and in this climate over the long course of a human life and a human lineage. You feel the cold reaching your feet through your boots, a reminder that you have been standing still for some time, and you begin to walk again, not away from this elevated place but around its perimeter, along the path that winds at the edge of the upper village, where the last of the gardens meet the beginning of the slope that climbs to the forest. The path here is the least walked path in the village. You can tell by the lightness of the impression it makes in the landscape, the way the snow covers it more completely than the paths lower down, the way the fence posts along its edge are fewer and farther apart. But it is a path nonetheless, a path that someone has walked often enough to establish it, that someone still walks, perhaps on mornings when the first light comes over the hill and makes the snow on the rooftops glow with a pink and golden warmth that this evening has not offered you, but that you can imagine, can feel the shadow of in the quality of the moonlit white around you. A stand of birch trees grows at the corner where the upper path meets the edge of the forest, their white trunks so close in color and quality to the snow around them that they seem almost to emerge from it rather than to stand upon it, as though they have grown up out of the snow itself, as though they are a form of snow that has become wood, or wood that has become snow, the two substances sharing their whiteness and their silence and their quality of being beautiful in winter beyond all other seasons. The bark of the birch trees is not uniform white but layered with gray and cream and pale brown, marked with the small dark horizontal lines that are the tree's equivalent of pores, that allow the exchange of gases through the bark that the tree requires, and these markings give each trunk its own individual character, its own particular pattern of light and shadow even in the flat moonlight, its own signature written in its own skin. You rest your gloved hand very lightly against the bark of one of these birches, not leaning, not pushing, just resting, feeling through the thickness of your glove the solidity of the tree, the living cold of it, the sense of something deeply rooted and deeply certain of its own nature. And you hold this contact for a moment before releasing it and continuing along the path, which is beginning now to curve back down toward the central parts of the village, toward the last few lit windows and the deep quiet that lies between them. The falling snow is your companion through all of this, has been your companion since you arrived, and will continue to be long after you have stopped walking, will continue through the night and perhaps through tomorrow, adding its increments to the depth on the rooftops and the ground, filling your footprints in the paths and the gaps you have left in the untracked snow of the upper village, restoring the whiteness and the evenness that your walking has temporarily interrupted. You feel no need to resist this restoration, no need to insist on the permanence of your passage through this place. The snow will cover what you have left as it has covered what others have left before you, and this is not an erasure but a continuation, not an ending but the ongoing and patient work of winter, which smooths all surfaces and quiets all distinctions and makes of the many a single white continuity that will wait, as winter waits, for the turning that eventually comes to all things. Your thoughts, if they can be called thoughts, have become very slow. They move through your mind the way the snow moves through the air, without hurry, without destination, settling where they settle and resting there without insisting on anything. The questions that ordinarily occupy you have not disappeared but have moved to a great distance, as though they belong to another life, another version of yourself who lives in a place and a time where such questions are urgent, where there is something to be done about them, where they require attention. Here and now in this moonlit village in this deep winter night, no such urgency is present, and the questions simply float at that great distance, visible but undemanding, present but not pressing, and you move through your own quieted interior the way you have been moving through the village slowly, attending to what is immediately before you, content to be where you are. The path carries you past the chapel once more, its narrow windows dark now but for the single sustained light that burns there, the one you noticed earlier in the evening, which has not wavered or dimmed, which continues exactly as it was when you first passed this building, offering its small, steady continuity to the winter night. The bells have long since been silent, but you can feel their absence as a presence, can feel the space that their sound occupied when it rang and that their silence now occupies in a different way. the way that a musical rest occupies time, the way that silence after sound has a different quality than silence that has not followed any sound, is richer and more resonant, contains within it the memory of the tones that preceded it, carries them as an undertone that the ear knows is there, even when it cannot be strictly said to be heard. You walk past the chapel and along the path that leads back toward the center of the village, and the moonlight follows you, or rather moves with you, lighting your way without any intention of doing so, illuminating the snow and the fence posts and the carved doorways and the dark roof lines with its same impartial brightness, making no distinctions, showing you everything equally, the beautiful. Plain, the very old and the merely old, the whole village laid out in its winter night with equal clarity and equal compassion, as though the moon itself understands that everything deserves to be seen. Chapter 4, slowing into winter stillness. Your walking has become slower. You notice this without any sense of surprise, without any desire to alter it. Your pace has slowed in the way that breathing slows in a warm room, in the way that thought slows in deep relaxation, naturally and without effort, as a consequence of the deep quiet that has been accumulating in you throughout this long evening's walk through the village. Your footsteps in the snow are quieter now because they are more gentle, because each one makes contact with the surface more slowly and more softly, because the whole of your movement has taken on the quality of the village itself, which moves at the pace of snow falling and of fires burning down and of winter nights deepening toward their middle hours. The snow is still falling. You have been aware of this throughout the evening, have mentioned it to yourself many times in the course of this walk, and you are aware of it again now, not as something new but as something continuous, as one of the reliable constants of this particular night in this particular place. The falling snow that has been with you since you arrived, and that shows no sign of stopping, that has no apparent desire to stop, that is simply doing what it does in the way that it does it, one flake at a time. One small settling after another, building its depth on every surface with the patience of something that has no conception of impatience, that has never once felt the need to hurry, and that never will. You walk past the stone well for the second time this evening, and it is the same as it was the first time you passed it, its round body buried in its ruff of snow and frost, its wooden frame hung with its icicles, its bucket still and frozen. And yet it seems different because you are different, because the evening has done its work on you, has removed something that you perhaps did not know you were carrying, and has left in its place a quality of quietness that is all the more noticeable for being by now. Not a contrast to anything, but simply the nature of your experience of this moment. You stand at the well for a longer time than you stood at it before, longer than might seem necessary, but necessity is not. What governs your movements now, and the well is worth standing at, is worth giving time to, is worth allowing into your awareness as fully as it will come, which is very fully, because old stones have a way of filling the awareness if you give them the opportunity, a way of communicating their age and their solidity and their patient usefulness to whoever is willing to stand still long enough to receive the communication. The frost on the stones of the well is intricate. You can see it even in the moonlight, the crystalline structure of it, the way it has formed layer by layer from the moisture in the air as the temperature dropped through the afternoon and evening, each layer adding its own delicate lattice to the one before, each one built according to the same fundamental principles of ice crystal formation, but varying infinitely in its particulars, varying in the way that snowflakes vary. In the way that all natural things that obey a small number of governing rules vary infinitely within those rules, expressing in their variation not chaos, but a kind of freedom within order, the freedom of living things to be themselves within the constraints of their nature. You breathe out slowly and watch your breath move toward the well and then disperse, and you feel in this breath something that is very close to the end of effort, very close to the point where the body has done what it needs to do for the day and is ready, quietly and without drama, to release the last of its held tension and submit to the rest that has been waiting for it all along. That has always been there just beneath the surface of the day's activities, patient and certain, knowing that it will have its turn. You move away from the well very slowly, your boots making their sound in the snow, a sound that is by now so familiar that it seems less like a sound you are making and more like a sound that belongs to the night, to this particular night in this particular village, a sound that the night expects from you and that you provide without having to think about providing it. The path ahead of you is the path you have been walking all evening, though it is also different now, different the way all places are different when seen at different hours or from different states of mind or after different things have happened. even when the things that have happened are as gentle and as gradual as an evening walk through a winter village. Lo, cottages on either side of you are almost entirely dark now. One or two windows still hold the faintest possible suggestion of light, not a lit lantern, but the dull glow of a banked fire seen through a curtain. A warmth so low and so contained that it barely registers as light at all, registers rather as a slight softening of the dark in that particular window, a slight difference in the quality of the shadow there, the merest suggestion that behind this glass and this curtain, something warm is still present. Still maintaining its small and dwindling vigil against the cold of the winter night before it too surrenders and becomes, by morning, nothing more than ash and the memory of warmth. You feel a correspondence between this dying down of the cottage fires and something in yourself, some equivalent of the banked fire, some quieting of the processes that have been running in you throughout the day, the thinking and the planning and the attending and the reacting, all of it now burning lower and lower, all of it now reduced to something closer to the ember than to the flame, warm still, present still, but contained, banked. Preparing itself for the long stillness of sleep the way a fire prepares itself for the long stillness of ash, through a gradual and unhurried and entirely natural diminishment that is not a loss but a transformation, not an ending but a resting before the beginning of the next beginning. The snow on the path before you is your path and you follow it. Your legs know how to walk. Your feet know how to find the ground beneath the snow and press into it and leave their impression and lift again for the next step. This knowledge in your body requires nothing from your mind, requires nothing from the part of you that thinks and plans and worries and wonders, requires only the body itself, moving through the world in its own reliable way, step and step and step, the oldest human knowledge, the knowledge that is older than language and older than fire and older than anything except the body itself and its need to move through the world. You are very peaceful. This is a simple thing to say and perhaps too simple to adequately describe what you are experiencing, but it is the truest thing, the most direct thing, the thing that cuts through any more elaborate description and arrives at the heart of what this evening has brought you, this long, slow walk through the ancient village in the falling. It's no peace, not the peace of having resolved something or completed something or achieved something, but the peace of having been for a sustained period entirely present to a world that asked nothing of you but your presence and offered you in return its full and unhurried self. The snow, the lantern lights, the old timber, the carved doorways, the frozen stream, the harbor under the moon, the rooftops weighted with winter, the chimney smoke, the bells now silent but still somehow present. All of it given to you freely, without condition, without expectation, in the way that all places give themselves to all who walk through them with sufficient quietness and sufficient attention. The path curves and you follow it, and the curve brings you past the orchard of apple trees once more, their snow-laden branches silver in the moonlight, their trunks darker at the base where the snow has built up around them, each tree a study in the relationship between darkness and light, between the solid black of the bark and the brilliant white of the snow, between the complexity of the branching above and the simple blanketing below. The orchard is very still. The trees hold their positions with the absolute stillness of things that have been standing in the same place for a very long time and have no intention of standing anywhere else. The stillness of deep roots and deep seasons and deep familiarity with this particular slope and this particular soil and this particular quality of winter light. Your steps have slowed again, or perhaps they have simply continued to slow in the way that they have been slowing all evening. The gradual reduction of your pace that matches the gradual deepening of the night and the gradual deepening of the stillness within you. Each step is a long step now, not long in distance but long in time, each one lasting a little longer than the last, your boot pressing into the snow with care, holding there for a moment, and then lifting again with the same care, as though you are attending to each step individually, as though each step deserves its own moment of attention, which perhaps it does, which perhaps all steps deserve, and we only understand this in conditions like these. In a winter walk through an old village on a moonlit night, when the quiet has reached such a depth that even the small moments of a footstep seem worth attending to. The cold has settled around you. Thoroughly now, so thoroughly that you have stopped noticing it as a separate thing and have begun simply to exist within it the way you exist within any consistent condition of your environment, without friction, without resistance, the cold in you having arrived at the accommodation that comes from prolonged acquaintance, from having been in each other's company long enough that neither of you requires acknowledgement from the other. Your coat is doing its work, your boots are doing their work. The wool of your scarf is doing its work, and the cold is doing its work too, which is to make everything very precise and very clear and very immediate, to strip away anything that softness or warmth might obscure, to present the world in its sharpest and most honest form, which is also, paradoxically, the form in which it is most restful to perceive. You find yourself at the wooden footbridge again, the bridge over the frozen stream, and you stop in the center of it as you stopped before, this time looking not along the course of the stream but down, through the snow on the bridge surface and through the ice of the stream below, into the darkness that lies beneath the ice, the darkness where the water is still moving, still making its way from wherever it rises to wherever it goes. Still keeping its current and its cold and its continuous unhurried passage through the winter landscape. You cannot see it, but you know it is there, and this knowing is enough, this sense of a life continuing beneath the stillness, of movement persisting beneath the surface of what appears to be motionless, of depth beneath the visible. The stream, you think, does not know it is winter, or rather, the stream does not distinguish between winter and any other season, the way the moon does not distinguish between this night and any other night, the way the old trees do not distinguish between this falling of snow and any of the thousands of fallings of snow they have witnessed in their long years of standing on this hillside above this village. These things simply continue, season after season, in the way that deep things continue, without the interruption of opinion or preference, without the overlay of meaning that human beings bring to every experience, and that makes of winter a story, and of snow a metaphor, and of cold a lesson, and of moonlight a failing. The stream simply flows, the trees simply stand, the moon simply shines, and in their company for this little while you have simply walked, and it has been enough, and it has been more than enough. You lift your eyes from the invisible stream and look out across the moonlit fields that border the village on its lower side, the fields that are white and unmarked and very large, the fields that seem to extend all the way to the horizon in the moonlight, the fields that belong to a different scale than the village, to the scale of the land itself rather than the scale of human habitation, and you feel the size of them as something that is not threatening but simply spacious. Simply a reminder of the proportion of things, of the relationship between the small, warm human place of the village and the large, cold winter world that surrounds it, within which the village has made its place and found its warmth and kept its fires burning through many centuries of exactly this kind of night. A movement at the edge of the field, very slow and very certain, the movement of an animal that knows this landscape thoroughly and moves through it without hesitation, without the small, cautious adjustments of an unfamiliar traveler. A deer, you think, though in the moonlight it is a deer-shaped movement more than a deer, a darkness moving against the white with a particular ease and grace that belongs to creatures who are entirely at home in winter. It moves for a few seconds and then stops and stands absolutely still at the field's edge where the darkness of the forest begins, and in its stillness it becomes part of the night, becomes indistinguishable from the other dark shapes at the forest's edge, becomes simply a part of the winter landscape that has always been there and will always be there, the living dark within the living white. You watch the place where you last saw movement until you are not sure you saw anything at all, until the deer or the deer shape has been absorbed so completely into the stillness of the edge of the forest that it has become a question rather than a certainty, possibility rather than a fact, and this too is a quality of winter nights, this uncertainty at the edges of perception, this gentle dissolving of the boundary between what you see and what you imagine, between the world outside you and the world within. Between the literal cold and dark and snow and the experience of cold and dark and snow that happens inside you, in the warm cave of your body and your consciousness. You move off the bridge and back along the path through the orchard, the path past the chapel with its one remaining light, the path through the narrow place between the oldest cottages, the path past the stone well, the path through the center of the village where the great linden tree stands in the snow with its complex winter branches. All of it again, all of it known now and softer for the knowing, all of it received not as new experience, but as the revisiting of what has already become, in the course of this one long evening, something close to familiar, close to dear. The silence is very deep. It has been deepening all evening, and it is now as deep as you have ever heard silence, as thorough, as complete, as present. The snow absorbs the small sounds that might otherwise exist, absorbs the sound of your footsteps until they are barely audible even to you, absorbs the sound of your coat moving with your body, absorbs the sound of your breathing until your own breath is something you feel more than hear. In this absorbed and thorough silence, the last remaining lights in the cottage windows are very precious, very tender, each one a small warmth that the darkness has not yet claimed, each one burning low and still and steady in the way that things burn when they are at the very end of their burning. One by one, as you walk slowly through the village, these last lights go out. Not all at once, not dramatically, just one and then another, the way stars disappear at dawn, each one simply ceasing to be there at the moment when it ceases, when the hand has turned the lamp or the fire has sunk low enough that its glow no longer registers through the curtain. The village is becoming dark around you, becoming the village in its fully nocturnal form, lit only by the moon and the stars and the brilliant whiteness of the snow that reflects both, lit from below as much as from above, the whole landscape holding and returning whatever light falls on it, in the generous and uncalculating way of snow. You walk, and the path continues beneath your feet, and the cold continues around you, and the snow continues to fall, and you continue to be here, present in this place in this night, walking the last of these paths through this old village in this deep winter, and you are not thinking about where you are going or when you will arrive or what will happen when you do. You are simply here in each step as it comes, in each breath as it comes, in each small creak of the cold contracted timber, and each small whisper of the falling snow, here and here and here, in each successive moment of this continuous and undemanding now. Chapter 5, Dissolving into Nordic Night. The snowfall is changing. It has been falling steadily all evening, but now in these late hours of the winter night it is falling more slowly, each flake taking even longer than before to complete its descent, drifting in the still air with a laziness that is also a kind of grandeur, the grandeur of something that has done what it needed to do and is now in the final stages of its doing, taking its time, feeling no urgency, arriving where it arrives with all the time in the world. The snow is thinning too, very gradually, so gradually that you could not say when the change began, but looking up now into the dark sky, you can see more sky between the flakes than you could an hour ago, can see the clouds breaking and the stars multiplying in the gaps, each new star appearing as though it has been waiting behind the cloud cover for the right moment to reveal itself, patient and cold and very bright. The village is almost entirely dark. The last lanterns have been extinguished. The last fires have been reduced to their final ember, their last breath of warmth contained now within the hearthstones of these old cottages, banked against the cold of the deep night, held there like a memory of the day's warmth, like a promise of the morning's fire, small and precious and certain. The chimneys have stopped producing smoke, or the smoke is so thin now that the moonlight dissolves it before you can see it, so that the chimneys stand bare and dark against the sky, their job done for the night, resting in the cold with the patience of stone. You are walking very slowly now. Your pace has continued its gradual reduction throughout the long course of this evening until each step is a deliberate and gentle thing, each one chosen with care, placed with a kind of reverence for the snow surface that receives it, lifted with a kind of gratitude for the snow surface that released it. You are walking in the way that people walk when they are not walking to get anywhere, when the walking itself is the destination and the arrival, when each step is the whole of the journey and the journey is the whole of what matters. The cold on. Your face is very clean. Your cheeks are cold and your nose is cold and the air you breathe is cold in a way that is deep and thorough and entirely without quality other than its coldness, stripped of all other attributes, cold simply for the sake of being cold, in the way that winter is cold simply for the sake of being winter, without apology and without alternative. But within your coat and your wool and your boots, you are warm, and this combination of outer cold and inner warmth is the combination that this entire evening has been built around, the combination that makes winter beautiful rather than merely difficult, the recognition that cold and warmth are not opposites to be chosen between but partners to be held simultaneously, that the beauty of a fire is inseparable from the cold that surrounds it, that the beauty of a lit window in a dark winter night is inseparable from the darkness and the cold within which it burns. The moon has moved across the sky in the hours of your walking. It is lower now, beginning its descent toward the far horizon, its angle different, the shadows it casts longer and more attenuated, reaching further across the snow in their dark lines before dissolving into the general brightness of the moonlit white. The light it gives is the same light, the same ancient and impartial illumination, but the angle of it has changed everything. The way the same painting seen at different times of day appears different, the same colors differently weighted, the same forms differently shadowed, the same meaning differently felt. You have walked this village thoroughly tonight. You have walked its paths from one end to the other and back again, from the harbor to the upper village and from the oldest cottages to the open fields, from the frozen stream to the elevated place where you could see everything at once. And now you are walking more slowly than ever, walking in no particular direction, following the path that presents itself with the same willingness that has governed all your walking tonight, the willingness to go where the landscape suggests. To let the path make the decisions that your own thinking mind would only complicate. And the landscape is suggesting, in the gentle way of landscapes, that you are nearing the end of your walking, that the village has given you what it has to give and is ready now to let you go, to release you into the rest that has been waiting for you. Since you arrived, the rest that all this beauty and this cold and this silence have been preparing you for. Your footsteps have become very soft. Not quiet as they were before, which was the quietness of careful walking on soft snow, but something softer than that, something that is almost inaudible, as though your boots have learned over the course of this evening to fall with such gentleness that the snow barely registers them, barely acknowledges them, lets them pass without the crunch and compression of earlier, receives them instead with something closer to acceptance, the acceptance of one soft thing for another soft thing. The acceptance of someone who belongs here for the surface that belongs to them. The village around you is utterly still. Not a door moves, not a curtain shifts, not a lantern swings. The birds that roost in the eaves of the old buildings are deeply asleep in their feathers, their small hearts beating very slowly in the cold, their whole beings reduced to the minimum necessary for life, held in the deepest and most economical rest that life is capable of, the rest that is closest to the essential nature of living things, which is not activity but the capacity for activity, not movement but the potential for movement. Not wakefulness but the ground from which wakefulness springs when morning comes. The trees along the path stand in their deep winter patience. The spruce and pine along the upper edge of the village, the birches in there stand at the forest's edge, the ancient linden in the central square, all of them standing in their particular stillness that is the stillness of trees in winter, which is different from the stillness of stones, which is different from the stillness of snow, each kind of stillness having its own character, its own depth, its own quality of being at rest. The trees are resting. The stones are resting, the snow is resting, the village is resting, and you are resting too, or very nearly resting, your body moving through the last of its movement with the slow inevitability of water finding the lowest point of the landscape, with the natural and unhurried resolution of all things that have found their direction and are simply following it to its end. You find yourself at the edge of the village, at the place where the last cottage and the first open field meet, where the path that has brought you through the village this evening transitions into the path that leads out of it and into the wider winter landscape beyond. You stand at this boundary for a long time, or for what feels like a long time, though time has become very elastic in this deep winter night, has stretched and slowed to match the pace of your walking and the pace of your breathing and the pace of the falling snow, which is falling now only occasionally, one flake and then a pause and then another, each one distinct and deliberate in the open air, each one arriving in its own time without reference to any time other than its own. Before you, the open field extends to the line of the forest, moonlit and immaculate, completely unmarked, a white space that is also a kind of openness, a kind of invitation to simply be empty for a while, to rest the mind on the blankness of it the way you might rest your eyes on a calm horizon, not looking for anything, not expecting anything, simply allowing the vastness of white to fill your field of vision and release you from the need to attend to particular things. The need to parse and to identify and to understand, the need that has been very quietly fading throughout this entire evening as the village and the snow and the cold and the silence have done their patient work on you. Behind you the village, ahead the field, above the thinning clouds and the brightening stars and the lowering moon, beneath your feet the deep soft snow of a long winter night. And within you a stillness that matches all of this, that has been coming into existence throughout this walk as the walk itself has done its work, building its depth with the same patience and the same incremental care as the snow building its depth on the rooftops and the paths in the fields, layer on layer, flake on flake, moment on moment, until the depth is real and the stillness is thorough, and the rest that waits within it is not a future thing but a present thing. Not something you are approaching, but something you have arrived within. You do not go out into the field. You turn very slowly and look back at the village for the last time tonight, at the dark rooftops in the moonlight, at the silent chimneys and the dark windows and the path you have walked so many times this evening. and you feel for it what you feel for all places that have given you something real, a wordless acknowledgement, a quiet gratitude that needs no expression because the place itself is indifferent to gratitude and needs nothing from you, is not diminished by your leaving and was not enlarged by your arriving, simply was what it was throughout your entire time within it, old and cold and still and full of its own long life, as it was before you came and as it will be long after. You begin to walk back along the path for the last time, and your steps are so soft now that you can barely feel them, can barely tell the difference between the moment of contact with the snow and the moment of lifting from it, the two merging into something more like a continuous gentle pressure than a series of distinct impacts, more like floating than like walking, more like being carried than like carrying yourself, and you let this happen. Let the path carry you along itself in the way that water carries things along its current, without effort and without resistance, simply in the direction that everything in this moment is moving. The village receives you for this final passage through its streets with the same equanimity with which it has received you all evening, with the same profound indifference that is also a kind of welcome, the welcome of a place that has made its accommodation with the presence of human beings over many centuries, and that neither requires nor resists your presence, simply continues as it continues, being what it is, offering what it offers to whoever is paying enough attention to receive it. You receive it now, all of it, one last time, the dark shapes of the old cottages and the moonlit snow on the path, and the pale gleam of the frost-covered well and the bare branches of the linden in the central square, and the carved patterns on the doorposts that are invisible now in the dark, but that you know are there, that you carry with you in the memory of having seen them, in the way that all the most important things are carried. Not as deliberate records, but as something absorbed into you so completely that you could not say where it ends and where you begin. The snow in these final hours is barely falling. A single flake drifts past you and touches the ground, then another far away at the edge of your vision, then nothing for a long while, and then one more, appearing from above and drifting in a long, slow spiral before settling on the cap of snow on a fence post, adding its infinitesimal weight to the long accumulated weight of all the flakes that have settled there through this long day and this long evening, its contribution so small as to be immeasurable and yet real, genuinely real, a real addition to the real depth of real snow in this real place, as real as anything else in the world, as real as your own footsteps, as real as the cold on your face and the warmth in your coat and the slow, deep rhythm of your breathing. Your breathing. You have not attended specifically to your breathing for some time. It has been simply happening in the background of everything else, the automatic and essential work of your body maintaining itself. But now you attend to it, or rather you notice that you are already attending to it without having decided to, that your awareness has settled on the breath the way it settles on a fire or a river, finding in it the same quality of continuity and the same quality of rest. The same reliable rhythm that continues without your intervention, and that asks nothing of you except to let it continue. You breathe in and the cold air fills you. You breathe out and the warmth leaves you in a small pale cloud that the night absorbs. In, out, the oldest rhythm, the first rhythm. The rhythm that preceded all others and that underlies all others, that is still going when everything else has stopped. The last thing to cease in the long arc of a life, and the first thing to reassert itself in every morning's waking. The breath, yours and the world's, continuous and certain and quietly miraculous. The path leads you gently through the final passages of the village, past the last of the familiar shapes, the corner where the cat sat earlier and which is now empty, the bench with its snow cushion, the bundles of dried herbs, the narrow covered passage between the eaves, all of it passing with a slowness that is barely movement, barely the passage of one place into the next, more like the dissolving of one quality into another, the way one color dissolves into another at the edge of a watercolor wash. The boundary between them real but soft, present but permeable. And then you are still. You have not stopped walking with any deliberate decision. The walking has simply ceased in the way that the snowfall has almost ceased, not suddenly but gradually, fading into itself, becoming less and less until it is no longer distinct from the surrounding stillness, until the distinction between movement and stillness has itself become unclear, and you are somewhere in that unclear place, that borderland. Between the two, where the body is so nearly at rest that it can feel the rest already, can feel the transition happening in itself the way you feel sleep approaching when it is very close, not as the absence of wakefulness, but as the presence of something else, something warm and dark and accepting and very, very deep. The village is around you in its winter night. The snow is on the rooftops and the paths and the fields and the orchard and the frozen stream and the harbor and the old well and the carved doorposts and the boughs of the spruce and pine and the bare branches of the birch and the linden. Snow on everything. A single white continuity that belongs to winter, and that winter has been building all day and all evening, and that will continue to deepen through the remaining hours of the night, silent and patient and certain as anything in this world. As certain as the cold and as certain as the moon and as certain as the breath. The stars are very bright. In the cleared spaces of the sky, where the clouds have parted and moved away on whatever gentle current moves clouds in a windless night, the stars are as bright and as clear as stars can be in a place that is far from any other light, in a place where the only lights that have burned tonight have been the low lanterns of the cottages, and they have all been extinguished now, every one. And the village is given over entirely to the moonlight and the starlight and the snowlight and the profound dark that holds all of these within it without diminishing any of them, the dark that is not an absence but a presence, the presence of the night itself in its fullest and most complete expression. You are resting. You have been resting for some time, or perhaps the resting and the walking have been the same thing tonight. Perhaps this whole evening has been a form of rest that you were only able to enter through movement, through the slow ceremony of walking through the cold and the snow among the old buildings and the frozen stream and the moonlit harbor, the rest that only became available to you as you gave yourself to the pace and the quality of this place. As you allowed the village and the winter to teach you their particular pace and their particular quality, and to invite you into them, and to hold you within them for the length of this long and generous night. The snow on the ground around you is perfect. Every surface is covered, every edge softened, every distinction between one thing and another either erased or gentled to a suggestion, a curve, a slight variation in the depth of the white rather than a hard border between different things. The village in the snow is a village made gentle, made soft, made into something that the mind can rest on without finding any edge sharp enough to catch, any angle pronounced enough to disturb, any surface anything other than the same continuous soft white that says, as clearly as anything has ever said anything, that this is a place of rest and that rest is available here, and that the night will hold you in it for as long as you need. Your eyes are closing, or perhaps they are already closed. Perhaps the darkness you're seeing now is not the darkness of the village in the night, but the darkness behind your own eyes. The warm interior dark that is the beginning of sleep, the darkness that holds within it all the images of the evening, the lantern lights and the carved doorways and the frozen harbor and the heron at the stream's edge and the moonlit snow on the rooftops and the stars in the dark water, all of it still present, still available. But growing softer now, the edges of each image dissolving into the surrounding dark the way snowflakes dissolve into warmer air, the way chimney smoke dissolves into the sky, the way one moment of a winter evening dissolves into the next and the next until there are no more moments discrete enough to be distinguished from the general flowing of time and experience into each other. The cold has become warmth, or perhaps the warmth has become the cold, or perhaps you're past the point of distinguishing between the two, past the point where such distinctions are necessary, held in something that contains both and transcends both, the way a deep and dreamless sleep contains both the memory of the cold outside and the warmth of the bed, and makes of both a single experience of rest that needs neither word. The snow falls very slowly and very rarely now, one flake at a time, each one taking the whole of the winter night to complete its descent, drifting in the still air with the most extreme and unhurried patience, finding its place on the surface of the snow below with the smallest possible sound, which is no sound at all, which is the silence of the snow adding to itself in the dark, which is the silence of the village in its deep and complete rest, which is the silence of the cold and the moon and the old timber and the frozen stream and the harbor and the fields and the forest and the long Nordic winter night that holds all of these within it as tenderly and as certainly as sleep holds you now, within it, resting, warm in the deep cold, still in the great stillness, breathing in the silence, breathing out, breathing, resting, held. The village is sleeping, the winter is complete. The snow is falling just barely, just one flake and then silence and then one flake more. And the moon is moving toward its setting, and the stars are keeping their ancient stations, and the old cottages are standing in their snow as they have stood through many hundreds of winters, dark and solid and warm within their cold, full of sleeping lives and banked fires and the deep quiet breath of rest, and somewhere in the white and the dark and the cold and the silence you two are resting entirely deeply. In the particular and irreplaceable rest of a winter night in an old place, the rest that the snow prepared and the cold clarified and the silence deepened and the long walk made possible. The rest that has been waiting here for you all along, patient and certain and warm, as patient and as certain and as warm as anything in this world, which is very patient and very... You turn from the window. The room is waiting, the same room it has been since you arrived 2 days ago. The same low ceiling with its dark beams. The same walls of white plastered stone between which the cold of the outside maintains a presence that the small room's air partially but not entirely addresses. The same braided rug on the wooden floor that your feet find as you move from the window toward the bed. The rug warm under your soles in the relative sense that any textile is warm against the cold floor beneath it. The warmth of material rather than the warmth of heat, the warmth of something between you and the cold stone, a modest and sufficient warmth, the right warmth for this floor in this room at this hour. And the bed that you have been aware of as a destination all through the walk, aware of in the same way that a person walking toward warmth is always aware of the warmth toward which they are walking. The bed with its frame of dark pine and its pillow, and its many layers of covering that someone arranged this afternoon in the particular way of northern beds in winter, with the intention of warmth rather than merely of adequacy. With the understanding that the room will be cold, and that the covering must therefore be sufficient to address not just the ordinary requirements of sleep, but the additional requirements of cold. And the covering that has been arranged on this bed is more than sufficient, is generous and warm and composed of a wool blanket, and then another wool blanket, and then a thick down quilt that together constitute a weight and a warmth that is everything a winter night can ask for. You sit on the edge of the bed. The mattress receives your weight with a solidity and a slight yielding that is exactly the right response, exactly the right combination of firmness and accommodation, and you sit there for a moment without lying down, sitting in the cold room with the cold from the walls and the cold from the window at your back, and the weight of the covering beside you, and the smell of the room, which is the smell of old wood and stone and wool, and the slightly mineral smell of cold stone walls. And you feel the accumulated tiredness of the walk, not a heavy tiredness, not the exhaustion of difficult effort, but the pleasant and clean tiredness of a body that has been outside for several hours in good cold air, that has walked a considerable distance at a slow and attentive pace, that has received through its various sensory surfaces everything that a Nordic winter night has to offer in the way of cold and moonlight and snow and silence, and the particular beauty of lanterns and frozen rivers and old pines and unblemished fields. And this tiredness is itself a form of completion, a physical statement of the evening's sufficiency, the body saying in its own direct and honest language, "This was enough, this was more than enough, this was exactly the right amount of a beautiful thing. And now the body is ready for the rest that comes after beautiful things, which is the deepest kind of rest, the rest that absorbs beauty into itself and transforms it into something that persists through the sleep and into the morning, into something that is there when you wake, something added to the self by the evening's experience that will remain added long after the memory of the specifics has faded. A residue of beauty in the body's deeper registers that sleep will process and integrate and return to you, as a quality of feeling in the morning that you might not be able to precisely account for, but that is real, is the genuine product of an evening genuinely received. You lie down. Pillow is cold at your cheek, the cold of cotton over down in a room that has not been heated, the cold of a pillow that has been lying in a cold room for several hours without anyone to warm it, and you feel this cold at your cheek and at the side of your head that rests against it with a precision that is almost pleasurable. The cold being so clean and so specific and so honest that receiving it on the skin of your face is not something to flinch from, but something to register fully, to feel completely. To acknowledge as the first contact between your warm body and the cold bed, the beginning of the negotiation between your warmth and the cold of everything around you, that the next few minutes will gradually resolve in warmth's favor. Warmth always winning this negotiation eventually. The body always generating enough heat to convert the cold interior of a winter bed into a warm one given enough time, and the time it takes is the right amount of time. Is not so long as to be uncomfortable and not so short as to be unremarkable, is long enough to be experienced as a process, as the gradual claiming of a space by warmth, the cold retreating centimeter by centimeter from the space immediately. Surrounding your body as your body's heat radiates outward and the covering holds it, and this process of gradual warming is itself a pleasure, is something to attend to rather than to merely wait through. The pleasure of feeling the warmth arrive in stages, of feeling the pillow warm under your cheek as the minutes pass, of feeling the air within the covering warm from the cold of the room to the warmth of the body, degree by degree, slowly and completely. The process arriving at its conclusion in a state of full and encompassing warmth that is the precise condition required for winter sleep. The covering settles over you as you draw it up. The weight of the first wool blanket, substantial and even, and then the second wool blanket over the first, its weight adding to the weight of the first in a way that is cumulative and satisfying, each additional layer of covering being more than its own warmth and weight because it is adding to what is already there. And then the down quilt over both blankets, and the down quilt's weight is different from the wool blanket's weight. It is a lighter weight. A more voluminous weight, a weight that comes from bulk rather than from density, from the loft of the down enclosed within the quilt's cover rather than from the compactness of wool. And this lighter but more encompassing weight over the heavier wool blankets together compose a covering that addresses every requirement of warmth and weight that a winter night in a cold room presents. A covering that holds the body and holds the body's warmth and holds the cold at the right distance. Outside the bed where cold belongs, and the feeling of being inside this covering, of having drawn it up and felt it settle around you, is one of the most complete and specific and unrepeatable feelings of comfort available to a person. A feeling that is so deeply right and so completely satisfying that it requires no words and would be diminished by any. The feeling simply being what it is, complete and sufficient and very good. The room is quiet, the cold air of the room is quiet. The snow falls outside the small window, visible through the glass as a soft and constant movement of white in the amber of the last lantern's light, each flake descending through the light and into the dark below the light in the same unhurried and inevitable way. And the snowfall is quiet too, is the quietest of all weathers, a weather that does not announce itself, that does not make sound as it falls, but only as it accumulates, only as it adds itself to what is already there, and even this accumulation is soundless. The snow settling on the snow that is already there without any audible impact, without any statement of arrival, simply appearing and resting and staying, and the stillness of the snowfall outside the window is continuous with the stillness of the room within, the inside and the outside sharing the same quality of quiet. The same quality of a world that has found its resting state and is at rest in it, fully and without reservation. Your breath has slowed. You feel this happening, feel the breath slowing in the way that breath slows when the body is warm and horizontal and quiet, and in the approach to sleep, not a decision that the breath makes but a consequence of the body's state. The breath simply doing what breath does when the conditions are right, which is to deepen and slow and deepen further, each inhalation becoming longer and more complete, each exhalation becoming longer and more gradual. The whole rhythm of breathing descending through its various levels of waking activity, the brisk breath of the cold lane, the slightly quickened breath of the uphill return, the steadier breath of the common room, the slower breath of the stair and the corridor, descending through all of these to this, the breath of the near sleep, the breath of the body that has found its warmth and its weight and its covering and its stillness, and is now doing the last and most effortless thing available to it, which is to slow toward the threshold of sleep, toward the place where the breath becomes the breath of sleep, and the distinction between waking and sleeping becomes too fine to locate, too subtle to maintain, too much like nothing at all to be worth the effort of maintaining. The moonlight comes through the small window in a rectangle that lies across the ceiling above your bed, a pale and softened rectangle of silver-white light that is further softened by the falling snow outside, each flake that passes the window modifying the light that comes through by some tiny fraction. The cumulative effect of many flakes passing being a slight additional softening of the moonlight's edges, a slight additional diffuseness. So that the rectangle on the ceiling seems to pulse very gently in rhythm with the snowfall, brightening very slightly between flakes and softening very slightly when many flakes pass at once, and this very gentle, very subtle pulsing of the moonlight on the ceiling is the most movement visible in the room, the only movement, the only change in a room that is otherwise entirely still, and you watch it from the warmth of the bed with the heavy covering over you and the cold at your exposed face and the pillow warm now under your cheek. And the watching of this gently pulsing moonlight on the white plaster of the ceiling is the last waking act of the evening, the final reception of the night's beauty before beauty gives way to the greater darkness of sleep. The snow falls outside. The snowfall is covering the footprints that the day left in the lane below your window, the footprints of the morning's commerce and the afternoon's passage and the evening's walkers, all of them being gently and patiently and completely covered by the new snow that falls without any awareness of what it covers, without any intention toward the footprints or toward anything else, simply falling in the way of snow, which is the way of things that fall because they are heavier than what holds them. That descend because the world below is where they belong, that settle because settling is what they do when they arrive where they belong. And the settling of the new snow on the old is so complete and so patient and so entirely without urgency that it is itself a form of rest. The rest of a thing that has completed its falling and found its place and is done, simply done, needing nothing further, requiring nothing additional, resting in its arrival as you are resting in yours. The snow in the lane and you in the bed both arrived at the right place at the right time, both at rest, both held in the same cold and quiet and beautiful winter night. The old pine tree at the corner of the last house in the older quarter is standing in the snowfall, receiving on its already snow-laden branches the addition of new snow falling on old snow. And the branches are bending very slightly lower now than they were an hour ago when you stood beneath them and looked up through the canopy at the stars through the gaps between the boughs, bending lower with the added weight in the gradual and patient way of branches that are accustomed to bearing weight. That have been bearing weight like this for many winters, and that know, if branches know anything, that they have the capacity. For this, that they will hold, that the snow will eventually stop and the weight will stabilize and the cold will hold the snow in place, and the branches will remain at their new lowered angle until the spring comes and the warmth finds them, and the snow on the branches releases in those soft cascading falls that the forest makes when it sheds its winter load, and then the branches will rise slowly back to their summer positions, relieved of their burden. And the summer will be long and the growth will be good and the autumn will come, and the leaves of the deciduous trees will turn and fall, and the pines will remain green through the first frosts and the first snows will come, and the branches will begin once more to receive what falls from the sky. And all of this is happening and will happen in the deep logic of the seasons that proceeds without anyone's management or assistance. The world cycling through its temperatures and its weathers and its growths and its rests in the ancient and reliable pattern that has been the pattern of the world in these latitudes since the ice retreated, and the forest came and the first people arrived and built the first fires and the first walls and the first roofs against the winter. And the pattern continues. The pattern has always continued. And the pattern is continuing now while you lie in your warm bed in your cold room, listening to nothing and watching the moonlight pulse very gently on the ceiling, and feeling the warmth deepen around you in the covering, and your breath slow and slow and slow. The frozen river is doing what frozen rivers do at this hour, which is to be silent at its surface and slowly moving in its depths, carrying the cold water of the winter forest in the patient way that rivers carry everything, which is without haste and without preference, simply carrying what comes to it in the direction that the ground directs. The water entering the river from the forest's slow seepage through frozen soil and moving downstream through the dark and beneath the ice in the minimal and barely perceptible current of a winter river. And the ice above holding steady, holding the silence, holding the record of the day's crossing that was the bridge and the footprints on the bridge's snow-covered planks, those footprints being the record of your crossing, your passage over the bridge and back. You're standing at the center of the bridge with both gloved hands on the worn railing, looking downstream at the moonlit corridor of ice between the dark pines, that record now being covered by the new snow the way all records are eventually covered. The snow not malicious in its covering, not intending erasure, simply doing what snow does, and the river not caring about the record of the crossing or its erasure. The river not caring about anything except the direction of its flowing, which is downstream, which is always downstream, the most reliable direction in the world. The direction that everything goes eventually, the direction that water has always gone and will always go, patient and certain and without any hurry at all. The well in the center of the village is receiving the new snow on its wooden roof, receiving it in the same way that every other surface of the village is receiving it, without distinction, without the well being treated any differently by the snow than any other horizontal surface. Snow covering the well roof with the same even patience with which it covers the lane, and the rooftops and the window sills and the garden walls, and the fence posts whose snow caps have been growing through the evening into rounded forms of considerable beauty, each one a small sculpture of accumulated white, each one slightly different from its neighbors in height and width and the exact curve of its top, each one the precise product of how much snow fell on this particular post in this particular snowfall. And these precise and various and lovely snow caps on the fence posts of the village are among the small beauties of a snowy night that no one is outside to see at this hour, that exist without witnesses, that are beautiful in their cold and quiet lane without any person present to receive their beauty. And the beauty is complete without the receiving. The beauty of the snow caps on the fence posts requiring no acknowledgement to be fully and genuinely beautiful. Existing in their fullness in the cold and the dark and the moonlight and the new snow that is adding even now to each one's height and rounding its top further into the particular snowcap form that fence posts in winter always achieve. The form that is the result of the physics of accumulation applied to a small cylindrical surface. Always the same rounded top. Always the same slightly overhanging edge where the snow has extended beyond the edge of the post in the cohesion of its crystals. Always beautiful. Always, and without exception beautiful, whether or not anyone is there. The bakery door is locked and its windows are dark and its stone chimney is cold. The oven has not been lit since this morning, and the chimney has been cooling since then and is now the temperature of the stone around it, which is the temperature of the night, which is very cold, and the ghost of the morning's baking that clung to the lane for so many hours has now fully dissipated, fully given itself to the cold air, and been carried away on whatever minimal movement of the air the night contains. And the lane in front of the bakery smells now only of cold and snow, and the faint thread of wood smoke from the last remaining fires and the barely there pine resin from the forest, the same smells as the rest of the lane, the bakery no longer distinguishable by fragrance from any other building, simply another dark and cold and snow-covered building in a sleeping village, waiting for the morning. Waiting for the fire to be lit in the oven and the bread to begin its work, and the particular golden light of a working bakery to appear in its window, and the first fragrance of the morning's baking to begin its long, slow drift into the cold air of the lane. And this waiting is a patient waiting, the waiting of a building that has done this every morning for as long as it has been a bakery, and that will do it again in the morning without any special effort or any special preparation. Simply doing again what it has always done, the routine of it so deeply established that it seems like something the building does rather than something that happens within it. The bakery baking the way the river flows and the pine stands and the snow falls as a feature of the place, as a given of this particular world. And all of this, the bakery waiting for its morning, the river flowing beneath its ice, the pine standing in its snowfall, the fence posts accumulating their snow caps, the well receiving its new layer of white, the old stone buildings of the older quarter holding their cold and their dark and their centuries, the bridge holding itself above the river in the reliable way of things that have been doing what they do for a very long time. All of this is out there in the cold and the snowfall and the moonlight, continuing. Persisting, being what it is in the patient and indifferent way of a world that does not require your attention to be fully itself. That is. Entirely itself whether or not you are awake to observe it, that was fully itself before you arrived and will be fully itself after you leave. And this continuation, this persistence, this being fully itself without you is one of the most comforting things you know about the world. One of the facts about it that allows the deepest rest, because it means that nothing is required of you while you sleep, that the world will manage its own persistence through the night without your waking participation. That the river will flow and the pine will stand and the snow will fall and the lanterns will burn their last amber hours, and the moonlight will move its rectangle slowly across your ceiling in the way that moonlight always moves across ceilings, slowly and without stopping. The rectangle shifting so gradually that you would not see the shift if you watched for it, but would see it clearly if you looked away and then looked back. The moonlight's patient movement, the only clock in the room. The only marker of the time passing while you sleep, the only indication that time is doing what it always does, which is to move forward without requiring anything of you but your presence in it. Your eyes are closed, you do not remember closing them. They have closed in the way that eyes close when the body has finally arrived at the place it has been moving toward all evening. Not suddenly, not with any decisive act, but gradually, the eyelids descending by degrees as the body's need for sleep overrides the will's capacity to keep them open. The heavy, comfortable weight of the covering and the warmth and the pillow and the quiet room and the slowly moving moonlight on the ceiling combining into something irresistible. Something that the eyes simply cannot remain open against, something that the body accepts with relief and willingness and complete surrender. The snow falls on the village. It falls on the lane below your window, on the compacted and now covered footprints of the day, on the surface that your own boots made their creak and press sound on through the long and beautiful hours of the evening walk. It falls on the roof of the inn, adding its new white layer to the old white layer that the storm 2 days ago deposited, and that the cold has held in place through the interval of clear sky, and that the new snowfall is now deepening and freshening and making more complete, the old snow and the new snow becoming indistinguishable from each other as the new settles on the old and the cold binds them together, making of the two falls one fall, making of the interval of clear sky something unrecorded in the roof's snow, simply an absence now filled, simply a gap now closed. It falls on the old pine, on the canopy of boughs that you looked up through from directly below and saw the stars in their pieces through the gaps between the snow-edged branches. The stars that are no longer visible from below the canopy now because the new snow is falling, and the clouds that carry it are between you and the stars still there, still burning at their distances. Still patient and bright and entirely indifferent to whether they can be seen from a particular pine tree in a particular village on a particular winter night. Still burning as they burned before the village existed and will burn long after it is gone, but for now hidden, for now behind the clouds, for now unavailable to any upward-looking eye, and the pine receiving this temporary unavailability with the same equanimity with which it receives everything. Not caring for the stars' visibility or their invisibility, simply standing in the snow. It falls on the bridge, on the snow-covered planks where your boots made their hollow resonant sound above the frozen river, on the worn wooden railing where your gloved hands rested and felt the smoothness of many hands over many years, on the snow at the center of the bridge where you stood and looked downstream at the moonlit river corridor between the dark pines. The footprints you left there are filling in very slowly. The snow falling at this gentle rate takes time to fill a boot print, the print's walls holding its shape against the falling snow for longer than you might expect, each new flake finding its place in the print's interior without immediately obscuring the print's form, and the print will be there in some form still in the morning, partially filled but still recognizable. Still the record of a person who stood on this bridge and looked downstream and breathed cold air and felt the cold at their face and heard the voice of the ice beneath and smelled the forest and the cold and was here, was truly here in this place on this night. It falls on the unbroken field at the edge of the village, on the surface that you stood at the edge of and did not enter, on the white that you chose to leave unbroken, and the new snow is covering that surface now in the same way it is covering all surfaces, without distinction, without any special awareness of the surface's intactness. And the new snow falling on the unbroken old snow is adding a new layer of intactness to the old intactness, is deepening the field's perfect white, is making it more perfectly white and more perfectly unbroken than it was when you stood at its edge and chose to leave it so. And the field is accepting this addition the way it accepts everything. Without resistance, without preference, simply receiving what falls from the sky and holding it as long as the cold holds. The cold holds. The cold holds everything in its patient and encompassing grip. The snow on the rooftops and the snow on the lane and the snow on the bridge and the snow on the field and the snow that is falling in the ice of the river and the bark of the old pine and the stone of the well and the wood of the fence posts and the painted wood of the house facades and the glass of the windows and the iron of the lanterns and the old worn smoothness of the railing and the old worn hollows of the stair treads and the cold air of the room that surrounds the warm bed that surrounds you. And you within the warm bed, within the cold room, within the sleeping village, within the falling snow, within the cold and patient night, you are the warm thing at the center of all this cold. You are the warmth that the cold is holding. The warmth that the winter night is holding in its cold arms the way the cold holds everything, without preference, without distinction, but with a completeness that is its own form of care. The cold holding you in the village and the snow and the river and the forest and the stars behind the clouds, all in the same encompassing grip, all within the same cold and patient and beautiful night. Your breath is very slow now. Each breath is a long and unhurried journey, the air entering at the nostrils, cool and clean, traveling inward and downward through the dark, warm passages of the body, reaching the deep, warm chambers of the lungs where the exchange happens, the oxygen passing into the blood and the carbon dioxide passing out, and then the long and gradual return of the breath, the body releasing what it has taken and processed. The warm air rising and passing out into the cold room where it meets the cold air and briefly mixes and disperses, and this exchange, this continuous exchange between the warm body and the cold room, between the warmth within and the cold without, is the deepest version of the negotiation you have been conducting with the cold all evening, the most fundamental and the most necessary version, the version that has been happening without your supervision through every minute of the walk and the return and the climbing of the stair and the lying down and the drawing up of the covering, the most basic of the body's transactions with the world. The one that cannot be interrupted, the one that continues through sleep as through waking, as through cold as through warmth, as through the walk as through the bed, the continuous and patient exchange of breath that is the most fundamental evidence of your presence in this cold and beautiful and sleeping world. The moonlight on the ceiling has moved. The rectangle of pale light that lay directly above your head when you first lay down has shifted, not dramatically, not so far that the movement is immediately obvious, but perceptibly shifted toward the western side of the ceiling. The slow arc of the moon's passage across the sky translated through the small window into the slow creep of the rectangle across the white plaster, and this shift tells you that time has passed. That the night has continued its patient progress while you have been lying here at the border between waking and sleep. That the world outside has not stopped for your lying down, and your closing of eyes and your slowing of breath, but has continued in its own unhurried way. The moon moving and the snow falling and the river moving beneath its ice and the old pine standing in the snowfall and the cold holding everything in its patient grip. And knowing this, knowing that the world continues, that it requires nothing from you to continue, that it will go on being what it is through every hour of the night and into the pale and brief winter dawn that will eventually come on the other side of the dark. Knowing this is the last and the most complete form of comfort available to you tonight, the comfort of a world that does not need you to be awake to persist, the comfort of being genuinely and completely released from the obligation of wakefulness. The permission that the night gives to every person in it to stop watching and stop attending and stop receiving the world's beauty for a while, to close the eyes and let the world be what it is without a witness, to sleep. The snow falls in the lane below the window. The lanterns burn in the falling snow, amber and steady, their circles of warm light on the white snow below them, softened now by the new snow that has accumulated on the panes of their glass housings. The amber slightly more diffuse than it was in the clear early evening, slightly more gentle, slightly more like warmth itself than like the light of warmth. And this softened amber in the falling snow is the last light of the evening, the last beautiful thing. The thing the night offers as its final gift before it gives itself entirely to the dark and the quiet and the deep and patient rest that is what the night is for. That is what the long cold and the long snow and the long moonlit walk through a sleeping village have been preparing you for all this time. Since the first step onto the cold wooden step at the inn's threshold, since the first sound of the boot on the snow, since the first cloud of breath in the cold air. Since the first amber circle of lantern light on the white lane, all of it preparation, all of it the world arranging itself and you arranging yourself within the world toward this, toward the warmth and the covering and the cold room and the slowly moving moonlight and the breath slowing toward sleep and the snow falling outside the window and the lanterns burning their last faithful hours and the whole sleeping village held in the cold and the dark and the snowfall. All of it held, all of it at rest, all of it complete. The snow falls, the warmth holds, the breath moves in and out and in. And the moonlight moves very slowly, very gently across the ceiling of the cold room, tracing its patient arc as the moon outside traces its patient arc, and the snowflakes fall past the window in the last of the lantern light, each one descending in its unhurried spiral through the amber and into the dark below, and the old pine stands in the snowfall with its boughs weighed low, and the frozen river holds its ice and its deep, slow-moving water. And the bridge holds itself above the river in the reliable and patient way of things that have been holding themselves above rivers for a very long time, and the unbroken field lies between the village and the forest in its perfect white, receiving the new snow that deepens its perfection without changing its nature, adding to its intactness rather than diminishing it. And the village sleeps, all of it sleeps, every amberlit window dark now, every fire banked low, every bed full of warmth and the warmth of sleeping bodies, and the cold holds all of it in its encompassing and patient and beautiful grip, and the snow falls on all of it equally and without preference or distinction, the same cold white gift to every surface in the sleeping village, and you are in the warm center of all this cold. In the warm bed, in the cold room, in the sleeping inn, in the sleeping village, in the falling snow, in the cold winter night that extends in all directions as far as the cold goes, and the cold goes very far, goes to the edge of the forest and beyond it, over the hills and beyond them. Over the frozen lakes and the dark pine forests and the fields sleeping under snow and the rivers frozen in their courses, and the roads empty of travelers and the farmsteads dark and sleeping, and the towns with their last lanterns burning and their last fires banked, and their sleeping inhabitants in their warm beds in their cold rooms breathing slowly and completely in the deep winter dark, and all of them, all of us. Held in the same cold, in the same dark, in the same falling snow, in the same patient moonlight moving slowly behind the clouds, in the same winter night that holds everything it holds with the same indifferent completeness. And the rest is deep, and the warmth holds, and the breath is slow, and the snow falls, and all is well, and all is at rest, and all is held gently in the dark, in the cold, in the silence that is not silence, but is the sum of all the small and beautiful sounds of a sleeping world. The snow settling and the ice adjusting and the pine bending and the river moving and the lanterns burning, and somewhere very far away the wind in the tops of the tallest pines, and beneath all of these the sound of your own breath. Very slow, very even, going in and going out in the rhythm that it will keep all through the night without requiring anything from you. The most faithful sound in the world, the sound of your own continuing. Moving in and moving out in the warm dark under the weight of the wool and the down while the cold holds the village and the snow falls on the lane and the moonlight moves across the ceiling in its patient and unhurried arc. And the night is long and the rest is deep and the warmth is complete and the cold is beautiful and all is well. All is entirely in. Completely well in the sleeping village, in the falling snow, in the deep and patient dark. The snow falls, and the breath moves in, and the breath moves out, and the world is quiet, and the rest is deep, and all is well. The story ends here in the warmth, in the quiet, in the falling snow, in the deep and perfect rest of a winter night that has given everything it has to give and asks nothing in return but this, the slow breath, the warm covering, the cold room, the sleeping village, and the long and patient dark that holds it all gently and completely until the morning.